Dial M for Murder. Alfred Hitchcock was a name I heard often, mainly because of the TV and book series that he lent his name to. But as for movies, I could only name a few, and until recently, had seen none of them. As such, my impression of Alfred Hitchcock was of the dark and mysterious, of being associated with Halloween, knife wielders, and things that go bump in the night. So imagine my surprise when I actually started watching some of his catalog and found none too little of that. His movies are detective stories, mysteries that largely observe an observer as they explore their observations. More interesting than spooky, often adventurous, like with North by Northwest, which many, including Hitchcock himself, credit with inspiring the early James Bond films. With that, I'd say that Dial M is actually a very typical Hitchcock film. Aside from a few brief shots, it takes place inside of an apartment living room. The action is in the words spoken, the intent, the reactions, the possibilities. This story comes from a play, and it looks and feels like one. People are seated, always drinking. So much drinking you have to wonder how they manage to stand up, let alone commit murder. Not exactly something that screams to be seen in 3D. Here, a few minutes in, and I started to wonder, well, what could possibly be expected with this? It seemed like it might be the equivalent of staring at a stereo fruit bowl for 90 minutes. But as it turns out, the stereo photography is very interesting, or, well, it's Hitchcock, so I guess it's intriguing. The variety of shots they extract from this one location is something of a wonder, and the stationary subjects give the eye plenty of time to absorb the visuals and apply them to the context. As I've mentioned many times before, 3D likes it slow, and in many ways Dial M is a rare 3D treat because of it. Here, the eye is given plenty of time to absorb, and in turn, the depth invites us to explore this cinematographer's dialogue. As an example, notice during this discussion, the visitor comes to realize he's in something of a bind, and the camera starts looking down on him. In particular, the actor's position, along with the camera raised, here shows dominance in this conversation. And the stereo helps this by making the visitor feel often far away, and you could almost imagine an invisible shadow being cast on him. Likewise, when a conversation takes a turn for the conniving, the scheming, we see things as if the audience is hiding in the room, peeping past perhaps a lamp, as if we're listening to something we shouldn't be, or perhaps it is that something is being said that just shouldn't be said. Now, when the ball is in play, we switch to an overview, making the room seem like a chessboard, and in many ways it is. We get a feeling of the area. The stereo eye touches the furniture, navigates the obstacles. We can sense that there really isn't a lot of room here. And a person could really miss out on this stereo experience if they don't allow themselves to feel while they watch. If you're in the mood for a get to the point and throw it at me, then this will be a painful experience. Nonetheless, we do get a few intentional pokes at the camera. In any other 3D movie, this might come across as a cheap moment, but the Hitchcock visuals are such a part of the experience that it fits right in. The cinematography is slightly loud and prone to contrast, so a glaring moment feels right at home. Close-ups in 3D were difficult to accomplish because the camera eyes have to be shrunk to get close, and back then the cameras were huge, and I wonder then if this is actually a close-up or if they built a big oversized telephone dial. If you've never used one of these before, the idea is that you stick your finger in the hole that has your desired number, you rotate the disc until your finger hits a barrier, and then you release it. It rotates back into position, making a series of clicks that the machine understood. And actually, old modems sometimes had a switch to go between clicks or dial tones. I guess there are areas that didn't update to tones. On first watch, I had trouble following certain aspects of the premise. In particular, I found the use of the death penalty was tough to wrap my head around. And, well, it was from another time. It seems surprising in our relative comfortable times to learn that as little as 100 years ago, executions were as routine as garbage collection. And it's from that perspective that this story makes more sense. In this world, it's an ever-present fact of life. And I suppose setting aside the death penalty might actually be something of a luxury afforded to comfortable times. Jails are expensive, and if you can't afford them or to build them, what do you do with the dangerous, uncooperative, or inconvenient? There are things we don't see often anymore, and we like to imagine it's because we have a more advanced understanding of things, that it's in the past. But really, execution is making a comeback. For example, in British Columbia, 5% of all deaths were provided by the government. With that success, all across Canada, it's now being introduced to assist with depression and homelessness and other expenses. Imagine your depressed son going to see a counselor and never coming back. The most scary thing about looking into the past is seeing its return, like a dial coming back to rest.